misconception that I worry about is that we also define for a similar reason, we define the battle for democracy too narrowly. And I'm going to go walk through this real quick. And my hope is if you remember nothing else, this is what you remember because it shapes everything else we have to do. The side on the left, Democrats, kind of the mainstream America. By left here, I don't mean politically left, but mainstream America, the media has generally, even some Republicans, has generally viewed the battle for America's democracy and approached it on two assumptions. The first assumption this side has brought to the battle, its battle, is that democracy, and I think we know this isn't true, but for a long time we assumed it was, we just assumed democracy was intact. It was safe. It was protected. That's sort of a post-1960s voting rights privileged view. John Lewis would have told us, or Nate Jones, my old boss, would have said, not so fast, folks. It's a never-ending struggle. But we've been operating almost assuming that democracy's fine. It's not going away. And that has shaped our battle. Number two, this side has also assumed correctly that its views in politics are generally a majority viewpoint. And in this assumption, this side is correct. We saw in Ohio and Kansas, Kentucky, a woman's right to choose is a majority viewpoint, strong majority, a bipartisan majority, common sense gun reform, lifting workers up as opposed to trickle-down economics, you name it, almost every public schools supporting them. Look at any poll on what they're doing with schools, and you'll see a real concern when they start pushing the money to private companies. I mean, again and again and again, what you will see is the side on the left here that assumes the democracy is intact also correctly assumes that it stands with the majority of Americans on almost every issue. Dealing with climate change is another one, on and on. So this side, with those two assumptions, actually fights its battle accordingly. And what does this side decide to do with those assumptions? Well, it's pretty simple. Let's go out and win elections by telling people what we're for. That's our battle, right? I mean, that's kind of what we do. We're for this, we're against this, and we know that a majority agree with us, so that's what we sort of do. We go out and win elections by saying what we're for. We very quickly, though, decide, especially since we think democracy is intact, that we're going to be really efficient in the best way to win these elections and accomplish what we want to accomplish is by focusing on federal elections. And if we win the House, the Senate, and the presidency, which we did in 2008, we did in 2020, we literally celebrate like we won the entire battle. And we get to do what we said we wanted to do, and most people agree with it. And we do celebrate as if that's the battle, and we've won it, don't we? I think we can all admit that. We all remember where we were when the Obamas faced out to the million people in Chicago, or although January 6th interrupted it, the Biden defeated Trump. We celebrated like we had won the whole battle for democracy, didn't we? And then a few months later, or a few years later, all of a sudden, it doesn't feel like we won. Somehow, 2010 and 11, only a few months after Biden wins, all of a sudden, it doesn't feel like we won, even though we thought we did. It feels like there's a backslide. And there's something really wrong with your strategy if you are losing even when you thought you were winning. And that's the predicament we've been in. That's why we have to see that politics right now isn't about a single battle, as if both sides are doing the same thing. That's a mistaken assumption. There are two battles taking place. The other side's battle is so fundamentally different. We need to see it for what it is, and that's how we'll do better. What's their battle? Their battle is, one, they understand full well that democracy can be undermined. That's our history. That's what Orban's doing. That's what that's what led to Jim Crow. They know this. They're not under some naive illusion that democracy just sits there magically. And not only do they know it, but they study it. Why do you think they keep celebrating Viktor Orban? He's undermined democracy. They know that. Number two, this is really important. They also know that for the most part, and the smart ones know this, their worldview is deeply unpopular. They know that a straight up vote on their views on abortion or gun rights or almost any of it, they would lose, like they did in Kansas, like they did in Ohio. They understand this. The smart ones do. And so we have a problem there. They know they can undermine democracy. They know in a straight up majority world approach, they would lose. So what do? Is their battle to win elections saying what they're for? No, it's not. Their battle is how can they subvert democracy enough to lock in a view that they know would lose in a fair democracy. That is their battle. It's a battle over democracy itself, to subvert it enough to lock in a view they know would lose. Now, I've had people say to me, my own father even sometimes, "Hey, David, that's a little rough, man. You're really accusing them of something bad here." By the way, my dad doesn't say this to me anymore. And I would say, well, why do you think they're studying Orban? Because that's what he's done. But now we have the perfect example of what I described in Ohio. They knew that the abortion referendum was popular. They knew it would pass. So they break the law to schedule an illegal special election, to change the rules, to subvert democracy, to win, even when they're at 41%. So that was the mechanism of doing what they do. But they also do it through gerrymandering, attacking courts, all of it. It's to serve that goal, subvert democracy enough to lock in views, book banning being another one, on, that would otherwise fail. Now, I don't have time to go through it all, but what is the key instrument they use? And this is why my first book is called Laboratories of Autocracy. The key instrument for them, to quote James Carville, is it's the state house is stupid. Those are the perfect institutions due to gerrymandering, due to the fact that no one knows who their state reps are, due to the lack of in-state newspaper coverage for the most part. It turns out these state houses are the perfect place, the perfect mechanism to do their vision. So while we're running around focusing on a few U.S. Senate races, they are going for broke in state houses. Now, why state houses? I'll do this real quick. They control every issue we care about, don't they? Including every hot button issue they care about. A woman's right to choose, 6-week bans, censoring schools, on and on. The state house does this far more than Congress, which hardly passes any bills, especially right now. So state houses have enormous control over the agenda that they care about. But state houses have one other major power, don't they? They write the rules of democracy more than Congress. Who votes? Election rules. You'll see it here. Who votes, when they vote, how they're purged. Do they have a month, a day, a week? Do they get a drop box or not? Can you ban water when they're stuck in long lines that you created? So they write these rules, and that allows them, if their concern is they're in the minority, that's a very powerful thing, isn't it? They can write rules to cut away at the majority they know would cost them power. Number two, sorry about the presentation here, it got a little cut off. They draw the district lines, don't they, as we've learned painfully. And with the power to draw district lines comes the power to draw fair districts with accountability for those in office, or they can rig the whole damn thing. And obviously, they're rigging the whole damn thing, not only in a way that puts them into majorities they haven't earned, which, Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, were all blue in 2012 when Obama won. But the gerrymandering in 2011, I won't go through all the details, allowed them to maintain power, supermajority power, even when they lost. That's how powerful gerrymandering is. That lasted through 18. Look at Wisconsin. They lost by 9 points across the state for the Wisconsin State House, by 9 points. And they still they still achieved 2/3 of a gerrymandered supermajority, even when they were 9 points underwater in 18. That's how much gerrymandering is perfect for them to do what they want to do. Putin would be impressed by this, no joke. Orban would study this. He does the same thing. And then, of course, there's the one other thing that is in the end the most important that I used to not think about, but it's true. For the most part, they've drawn districts where they never individually feel accountable to the voters. It's not only they have a majority or a bigger majority than they've earned, it's that to a person, this includes Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, to Matt Huffman, these people have never been in a real election their entire careers. And that means they feel no accountability to the people. And that's where the wheels really come off. That leads to the extremism and the corruption. And I won't go through all the details. By the way, no one knew who they are, except for a bunch of fat cats in Columbus, like First Energy in ECOT. So while the people back home have no choice, they're serving the interests of the power brokers. And we see it play out all the time, don't we? And what happens in these systems is once they're no longer accountable, the incentives are all upside down, aren't they? Bill Seitz and the Republicans and Brad Winstrup, they literally have an incentive to be an extremist because they don't want to lose a primary. That's the big incentive. Do extreme things. They have an incentive not to serve the people back home. They have an incentive to serve the private interests who want a piece of that public school money to make profits. They give some of it back to the politicians. They have this really screwed up incentive, And I won't go through all the details, but the reason you see this rapid decline in outcomes all over Ohio and other states where our schools are doing worse and our wages are stagnant and our towns are lacking healthcare and infrastructure, these people do not have an incentive to serve the public. They have an incentive to serve the private using public assets. And that's the downward spiral. They also, though, third from the bottom, they have a massive incentive to continue attacking democracy because they realize that if they ever face the real election, having been too extreme for their district, like sending a 10-year-old rape victim to another state, or having terrible public outcomes like draining their good local public school of money to go to some for-profit entity somewhere far away, they know they would lose. So they always have to keep gerrymandering. It sort of ratchets up and protects their extremism. So that's their battle. And the reason I'm so concerned, and we're doing better, I'm going to talk about this for a second. The reason I'm concerned is while we're focusing on a few swing states and get really excited in federal elections, what are they doing? They're going for broken states, aren't they? Win them, gerrymander the hell out of them, suppress the vote of the other side, and ram through an unpopular agenda, and no one can stop you. That's what they do. And that's what's happening. That's why Mississippi, Tennessee, Iowa, I'm on calls with these states all the time. They're all going through the same thing because this is their model. And the extremism, the corruption is accelerating. There are no brakes on it. Now, this is their broader agenda. I won't go through this. This is all the things they want to do that are largely unpopular. To make it a little bit worse, I'm going to get to the good stuff in a second. They already know everything I've described. They've created a national organization to do this work. You all, I'm sure, know of ALEC. It's not like each state figures it out on their own. They've used private money, the Koch brothers and others, to weaponize state houses for one national agenda. And that's why the voucher explosion is happening everywhere at the same time, or the Don't Say Gay bill at the same time, or the effort to keep rural areas from having broadband all at the same time. It's a national agenda. It's not a one state at a time agenda. Now, what's our response been to date? Now, it's getting better. Our response is generally, think of a soccer game. They are on offense. Those little circles with those states, the abbreviations, that's their forwards. They are shooting at a goal again and again and again. And until recently, and it's changing, I'm excited to announce some of these things tonight, we have not only been playing offense in states, we haven't even playing defense. We literally have allowed, this is a pretty small but important graph, in 22, 50% of the Tennessee Republicans who did the awful thing to their colleagues were unopposed. Texas, it's like 40%. Other states, 60%. We not only are not in the game where they are, we're not even, on offense. We're not even playing defense. So the person who wrote the Mississippi abortion ban that led to Dobbs, no opposition the next election. The Texas guy who wrote that terrible law there, no opposition the next election. One of the authors of the Ohio abortion ban, no opposition. Of course, they're going to keep acting like this if we don't even hold them accountable by knocking on doors, even explaining what they do. So this is the sobering picture. And it's why we've had this pattern that we think we've won, but we still feel this terrible feeling that we're not winning. It's because they've been on offense where democracy is shaped. And for the most part, we haven't even been on defense. And it's changing. And I've been proud to be part of that change. What do we have to do differently? And then we can go to Q&A. We have to reframe the battle we're in as democracy itself, just like they do. They are right. That's what this is about. This is not about some magical sort of clean battle over a few federal offices every 2 years. If democracy was intact, that would be just fine, but it's not. We're in a battle for democracy itself. That means we're in a long battle, like Stacey Abrams fought in Georgia. She knew that this had to be fought year after year after year, like John Lewis did, like the suffragists did. We're in the same place, folks. When we make everything about a 2-year cycle and we get all excited with a few months to go, and then we drop our everything and move on for 10 months or 12 months, while Steve Bannon and Karl Rove are recruiting election deniers or running in every state house, we are losing the battle for democracy. Once you see it's a long battle, you see how you have to strategize and stick with it. Number 2, all 50 states. Now, you don't want to hear this, but it is wrong that people in Oklahoma and Mississippi and Tennessee, just like it wasn't right they lived in the Jim Crow South, it is not right that in all these states, because we don't think of them as swing states for U.S. Senate races, we literally say to them, we're sorry, we're not fighting for democracy in your state. That's just wrong. It's also not smart because as we've learned recently in Ohio, in Kansas, in Texas, if you look at the polls, we actually are with the majority on many issues. But if you're not running in these places or putting on a fight in these places, you'd never know it. The people wouldn't know it either. You got to fight in all 50 states. Not only is it wrong, not only is it a lack of accountability, make them more extreme, which it does. I mean, look, you all know this. Obama won Iowa and Indiana. Clinton won Missouri. But when we're not there, those formerly purple states have gone through a downward spiral of extremism because we're not even there making an argument. We've got to bring the battle further. And I talk to states all over the country about what we can do there. Okay, that means going on offense and playing defense in these places. Don't just demand a new U.S. senator when Dobbs happens. Figure out who the hell voted for that law in Mississippi and run against them next time. That's how you hold account. That's how you bring accountability. To let them keep going unchallenged term after term is insanity. And we have to define running for office as critical public service that's holding extremists accountable, even if our candidates don't win. We'd much rather have them run than not run and hold people accountable. Same story within states. You got to run across whole states. That's very important. I'm not going to go through all this because I want to go to questions, but I lay out in my book, Saving Democracy, there are ways to do this. There are best practices to do it. We have to start showing the people running in tougher districts in the way we support them financially, in a way we recruit them, in every other way that we value them running. Now, here's some really good news. I've been running around like a crazy person for the last year and a half telling people this. And I've been trying as best I can to lift this argument. No, I don't want to claim credit. Others are doing the same thing. But in the last couple of weeks, we've seen a huge decrease in the number of uncontested races in Arkansas. North Carolina had 30 or so uncontested in 2022. I can't remember the exact number. They are down to 2. Ohio had 20 uncontested in 2022. They are down as of now to 5 and hoping to go lower. So the good news is people are starting to wake up and understand we have to do this. And I've created this organization I'll talk about in a second called Blue Ohio, where we try and convince people that some of your money is better spent going to these candidates. It's a much higher value than being a rounding error on some $100 million budget that you get emails from every day. So we try to come up with a way that we can help people give to these tough districts where these candidates are looking for $10,000, not millions, and where that $10,000 could be the difference in holding extremists accountable or no one in that district ever hearing about what their incumbent is doing. This is bigger than Trump. Obviously, Trump is a mortal threat to our democracy. I don't want to ever be confused as to thinking that we can let him win. But think about it. If all we do is beat him and we don't keep making gains or trying in state houses, we will go through what happened in 20. They will keep attacking democracy through think about it as the military, through their high wall, from their high wall. We have to beat Trump. And by the way, it's not zero sum, is it? How much better is it for Joe Biden if we have a candidate in 95 Ohio House districts and not 75? Or Arizona, this swing state where people are trying to recruit in every district, or Georgia. It helps knocking doors. It helps being on message. It helps stopping Republicans from taking credit for things Joe Biden and Sherrod Brown did, which they will do if we don't run against them, and we're not even there to tell them otherwise. And then the last thing, we can talk about this in detail afterwards. Once you see the battle for democracy itself is literally being fought, not just in a few swing states, but everywhere, that you and we are on the front lines in its state house, its school board, its state Supreme Court, in every state. All of a sudden, my hope is people see, man, there's a lot more they can do than watch Rachel Maddow and be upset about what she's describing, or watch a debate and being embarrassed that Vivek is from Cincinnati, or whatever else. We have to see that there's so much we could all be doing to recruit candidates. We'll talk about this, to engage voters. I'm going to give a link later. Every one of us has a footprint, a network in our world. This group together, collectively, your footprint of your jobs, your nonprofits that you're part of, the volunteer work, your family, your fraternal organization, everyone. It's a massive footprint. But because we've thought about the battle as Democrat versus Republican, we've been kind of gun shy to use our footprint to really lift democracy, haven't we? Once you realize we're battle for democracy, that means if you're on the board of the Free Store Food Bank, you could use that board to register every voter who comes into the free store or the drop-in center or Cincinnati Health Clinics, or AFTAB could have every single rec center in registering voters. Because once you realize it's a democracy battle, all those functions are legitimate nonpartisan activity to save democracy. John Lewis wasn't just speaking about his time. I used to think that. I'm sure most of us did. He was telling us what to do in the year 2023. All of us. This is it, folks. This is it. We got to run at every level. We got to draw the contrast with the extremism of Trump and Matt Huffman and whoever runs in the 2nd District and all of them. We can't draw that contrast if we're not running half these places. And then we all can engage voters, not just in the last few weeks, knocking on doors, desperately telling them, please don't forget to vote, but in every single part of our footprint where we're interacting with these voters, we could be engaging them just like John Lewis says we should. So I will stop sharing, stop talking, and looks like someone fell asleep. But hopefully the rest of you are with us. I am going to, you can hear my voice, right?
Yes.
I'm going to take a few bites of my soup as you ask me questions. Apologies for eating in front of you.
All right. We'll start with Sue.
Thanks, David. I love what you're doing. Your energy and passion is inspiring. And my question has to do with education. Why do you think the Republicans are so determined to undermine public education and support for public schools?
So I see a lot of old friends on this call. I'm looking at Lucy Crane. I've known Brewster for years. Dan Hurley's there. Guys, this is not what I would have said 10 years ago. I literally would not. I didn't see it. There's Steve Black. I mean, but the more I see it, the education move, it's corruption and it's ideology, a far-right ideology of getting this money into private religious schools. I wouldn't have said that. And whenever you see the combination on the Republican side of some donor making money out of their policies and the far-right group saying, we love this thing, watch out, because those will always explode. And I try, I'm going to send this. I'm not trying to give people free publicity, but I have a Substack account. And I've gotten really consumed with the voucher issue because the voucher issue is really scary. And I did something a few weeks ago where I showed, and a lot of you probably already knew this, that almost all the money, almost all of it, and this is true in states across the country, is literally going not to poor kids in struggling public districts to then go to good schools. It's going almost entirely to well-off families who are already at private schools. And the schools aren't any better. In fact, this data show that they are, for those who do change, their educations have been more damaged than they were because we had to shut down schools during COVID. It's an absolute disaster. And one of the things that hopefully you saw, I'll put this link to my Substack, because if you want to see me always talking about this stuff, this is how I share it. If you go back to the incentives that I described, I'll go back to it. And this is the key insight about how they never, where is it? About how they never, oops, I will get away from that. Oh, there it is. Hold on. The key insight that I made, and one thing about writing a book is it makes you think through things that you never really thought through. The key insight that I've reached, and I believe it bears out in every way, sorry, let me get back to this, is their incentives in their world of no accountability is not public service. It's the opposite. They are using public power to give away money, regulatory power, and other things to their donors. And the consequences are disastrous public outcomes. And how do we know of many ways that this is true? Because if their goal were to serve public outcomes, and those public outcomes were failing as badly as they are with vouchers, they would change it, wouldn't they? But for their motivation and their incentives, they are serving their goals, which is keep some far-right ideological groups happy, keep Betsy DeVos happy, keep ECOD and other donors, who knows what else is out there right now, keep the far-right happy, keep donors happy. And so even when the public outcomes are failing miserably, they keep doing it because their goal isn't public outcomes. When I hear them say the words policy, They are not serving public policy. Like when they were giving TANF money in Mississippi to Brett Favre's volleyball courts. That's a symbol of what they're doing. They are using or not regulating railroads. We pay the price. The public can't stop them because of gerrymandering. And they, every single time, from gambling to First Energy to ECOT, some portion of the money, our money, the public money that we give them, flows back to them in donations and now dark money groups. And from Mike DeWine to John Houston, down to every state rep on their side, that's their system. So it's not public service. And that's why I think when you see what's happening in schools, they are serving the goals they're trying to serve. The goals just don't happen to be stronger public education. The goals are the opposite.
Dave, before we move to the next question, or real quick, would you speak a little bit about Blue Ohio and what it's doing to
Sure.
support?
Yes, thank you. I'll put a link up. I would love everyone here to join Blue Ohio. We will not change what's happening until we start to value running everywhere. Every single Republican who has done something extreme, to the extent we can, needs to know there's a candidate knocking on doors in their district talking about the ban that sent that 10-year-old to Indiana, or what DeSantis is doing, or some other crazy thing. And when we don't run against these people, they just keep doing it. Their incentive is to be more extreme. We need to make their incentive to be less extreme. Now, of course, gerrymandering is the original sin. But I submit that in a world of gerrymandering, it's far worse to not run than to run, even in tough districts. The message we have sent to these candidates in tough districts for years is that we don't care if they run. If they're not in a swing district, if they're not running for federal office, we have basically said to them, we hope you run, but we don't really care. I've seen it. And because we've done that year after year, you get that slide I showed you. You get a slide where in district after district, tens of millions of Americans, hundreds of millions, literally don't even have a choice or any information on the extremism that they could very well disagree with, because we have not sent a signal that we value them running. What Blue Ohio does is it says, give to Sherrod Brown. Of course he has to win. But part of your democracy budget is to help give to candidates in districts that have for far too long been overlooked, and therefore no one runs in them. And I'm gonna put a link up here. You can study this, see it. And what I've tried to make a bet on, I did this a couple years ago, and I'm really excited tonight especially. Here's Blue Ohio. You can join. It's a monthly contribution. We have a monthly meeting. We have guests from all over the country. We had Nancy Pelosi, and Gavin Newsom, and Jamie Harrison, and Jamie Raskin on our calls. But the heart of it is that we ask people to put in 10, 12, 15 bucks a month. And that money goes directly into the campaigns of the toughest districts. And we did this last year in 2022. And there were 13 districts above the ones we didn't compete for in 2020 that in 2020 did not have $5,000 in their campaign. 13. Last time, in only 5 months of Blue Ohio, not a single candidate running on the Democratic ballot had less than 5,000. And that was in only 5 months. Matthew McGuire, there's a whole group called Arena that is working on embedding and paying staff. So the Blue Ohio is one part of it, money. We have to recruit. We have to staff. We have to have digital help. There are a lot of people doing that work. I talk about them all in my book. But the biggest gap is that no one gives any money to these people. You all know my mom gives out a lot of money. Some of you do too. But you often don't answer the call of the 99th hardest district in Ohio and say, sure, I'll give you some money. You don't have enough money to give to 99 districts. That's why a crowdfunding mechanism like Blue Ohio is the one that says, okay, Allison Rousseau is going to give to some swing candidates. You're all going to give to some swing candidates. We're going to introduce you to some of the toughest districts. But together, through our crowdfunding, we're going to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars, which we are doing. And we are going to give that money as a bathtub model to the hardest districts up. Remember, long game. If we do that every 2 years, right now we have more than 1,000 people. That will make us, this coming year, the third highest donor to Democratic legislative candidates in the state of Ohio because 1,000 people are kicking in that money. I'm very greedy. I want that to be 2,000 people or 3,000 people. And then we're getting close to $1 million. And that's how we really, really get up to a point. And one of the things, I don't want to claim causation here, but in 2022, there were 20 candidates. No, I'm sorry, there were 20 Republicans who did not have an opposition when they ran in 22. 20, huge percentage. As I said earlier, tomorrow that number will be at most 5. And I think Blue Ohio and staff like Allison Rousseau and her great staff, we're all starting to say, my God, it's important we run everywhere. We are here to help. And so that's what Blue Ohio is. Because I'm greedy, I'm going to put another link up. Please join. You'll love the meetings. They're very engaging. You get all the latest on the State House and everything else. By the way, I want to make sure I acknowledge, speaking of running in tough districts, but important districts, Joe Wessels is with us tonight. He has been in this community for as long as any of us. And so I was thrilled when he signed up to run for the 2nd congressional district. It's been very frustrating watching Gene Schmidt, Brad Wenstrup allow the towns of the 2nd district. My wife is from Adams County, so I see this. The place is dying on the vine, and every member of Congress on the Republican side has been voting against the interests of these communities for years. And we need someone in there like Joe to turn that around. So I'm really excited, Joe, to have you running. And
thank you, David.
Put a link up, but I'm thrilled that you're running.
Thank you. Great. Appreciate it. I'm excited to hear about Blue Ohio as well, too. And I've already been out to Portsmouth and Hillsborough, and folks out there are amazing, and they're excited, and they believe, like I believe, that it's going to be tough, but we can win this. So we just have to give people a choice.
And you'll know this. It is literally the perfect. I have a chapter in my first book, Laboratories of Autocracy, that starts in Manchester, Ohio, right on the river, Adams County, where a group of citizens begged their state senator to help them because their town is dying. And if you ever see, I put pictures of this on Facebook and Substack often. It's a ghost town. It should make you angry if you have a heart. And these poor citizens said to their state senator, gerrymandered, of course, what would you do to help us? You know what he told them? Sometimes you might just want to move. Now, I'm okay with a father telling a daughter or son, maybe move. But you don't have a state rep who ever gets to say those words to their constituent. And so I think there's a lot of need. And I once tried to recruit Jerry Springer, by the way, to run for the 2nd district. There's a lot of need. And I think the right kind of campaign can really set these places sort of seeing a better direction than literally people who just have voted against their interests for years.
Right. iPhone, you're next for a question.
Take another bite while you.
I think that might be me. iPhone. Hi, my name's Rachel, and I'm in Delaware County, Ohio. And so we started a nonpartisan Facebook group for Issue 1 in August that has grown into about 20,000 people. And I think that one of the things that has been really key here with Issue 1 in August and November is trying to get us, and it's hard at times for myself, but trying to get us as Democrats to call out officials by name, but not reference all Ohio Republicans or whatever. Right. Because what we have found in our group is there's a lot of moderate Republicans that are hesitant to take off that label as they've had it for their entire adult life. But they really are, as you said earlier, they don't agree with the policies being made. They don't agree with these extremist candidates and extremist officials that we have currently. And the hardest part that I have found so far is getting a lot of my fellow Dems to be willing to tamp down on the language, the broad generalizations. And I was just wondering if you had any suggestions for how, because I mean, we have out of the 20,000, I'd say probably 15,000 are Dems, but we do have about 5,000 Republicans that have fought for issue one, against, and then for, obviously, in August and November. And, I really think they are coming around to the side of reason and logic and goodness. But they get very offended when everyone's just like, oh, generalized, Republicans. And then they tend to shy away and go back to their roots.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most important questions anyone could ask. Issue one provides the map of how we save democracy in Ohio, and it is a bipartisan map. As issue one in August, maybe even more so than issue one in November, although they were very similar. But what you saw, and I really give huge credit, and I write about this stuff all the time. Thank you, John Kasich and Betty Montgomery and Bob Taft, for saying before the August election, I'm a Republican. I may even be pro-life, but this thing is ridiculous. When people speak out and we create campaigns like you are doing that cross party lines, in Ohio, that is how we win. And that's why, and think about this for a second. And again, I don't want to assume everyone here is a Democrat. If you're a hardcore Republican, I probably offended you at some point. I shouldn't do that. But hundreds of thousands of Republicans in August and in November walked to a poll. They had a Republican sample ballot given to them. They had a governor who told them to vote yes and then no. A lieutenant governor. Their state rep, J.D. Vance. They knew that Democrats were all fired up to do the opposite. They voted with us. And as your question suggests, I want us to remember those people, because maybe that's not the map that Sheriff Brown will win because we want him, we need him to win. Maybe his map will be a little more partisan. But the map to end gerrymandering should look very similar to the map in August and November. And when I talk about this map, and I've written on this too, maybe I'll try and find it for you guys. I'm talking about a blue Butler County in November. I'm talking about Greene County, Geauga County, voting no on issue one in August.
Us in Delaware County.
Portage County. Delaware is like ridiculous at this point. But I think of Delaware as sort of shifting. Geauga is not even, it's Tea Party. It's literally like libertarian. They voted no in August, yes in November. The gains we are making in Warren County and Delaware County, like you are doing, by doing it the way you're doing it, long-term, or even, they change Ohio. So yes, we need to cling as best we can. And maybe on a call like this, I get too fired up. This is not my speech that I would put in a 30-second ad. And one way to do it, by the way, because, and I have a whole chapter in one of the books on this. One way to do, and by the way, how else do we see this play out? The absolute shellacking of Moms of Liberty candidates all over Ohio. They were too much for moderates. They liked the public servant style. So what we saw, again, Republicans voted no for these people in Anderson Township, in Madeira, huge turnout to keep these crazies from out of their schools. And that was a lot of Republicans. So yes, there's a huge lesson from 23 about that coalition. How did it happen? One, we had enough high-level people willing to say, I'm a Republican, I don't like this. That gives cover. And number two, I think the lesson to remember is they're embracing very toxic issues and alienating some of their own voters. And they also have outcomes that are at a certain point indefensible. And this is what I would say to Joe Wessels. You run in the 2nd district. You may talk about their extremism on some issues, but you talk about the fact that vouchers will destroy rural schools, and the North Adams Green Devils and all their fans should be appalled that the school system that is the center of their community is being destroyed because they want to give money to a fat cat. That's not partisan, and they will respond to that. So find the issues that are less partisan to everyday people, and find the issues where they're far too extreme. And then also, as we saw with both issue ones, there's clearly an electorate in Ohio, especially in August, that understands how democracy is supposed to work and came together across party lines and said in August, don't mess with our democracy. And I think when we have a gerrymandering election, that's the universe of people we should also try and sort of recreate in that voting block. Great question, though.
April. You're muted.
Right, thank you. Sorry, daughter is driving. just for the record. So my question is, Matt and I and a couple others have listened to the series done by New York City Public Radio that is called Divided Dial. And it was really focusing on the power of AM radio to transmit misinformation into the cultural, like, LexisNexis of conservatives in places just like 70% of the map of Ohio. And I don't know how to combat their market share, like dominance and monopoly that exists. I mean, 700 WLW is a perfect part of that story. They didn't cover it because it's national. But, you know, I want to know, we have letters to the editor that we write. We try to get out on Facebook. We hold meetings and have committees and do voter registration. But what are the places with some leverage possibly we could be applying that maybe we're not yet, to try to counteract the extreme dominance of conservative media in AM radio, for instance?
That's a great question. By the way, I would never eat in a Zoom call. I know that's such a party foul, but it's because my voice is like struggling. So I apologize that I've done that at all. Please don't judge me too harshly for that. There's no simple answer because we are outgunned in radio. But in August and November, what we did worked. And I think some of the lessons were, we framed the debate early. That State House rally, I was up there. Some of you were probably there. We framed it early through real activism. And that frame, I mean, there was some polling early on that suggested that their argument about how it was too easy to change the Constitution and we should make it harder actually had a lot of purchase. It actually was above water in the polls. But the early frame that we laid out through rallies, not talk radio, but rallies, letters to the editor, a meme that had Ohio State 59, Michigan 41, we lose, like all of it. National television, which some of us helped get a national focus, which was really helpful. So Ohioans saw it. They wanted an 8% turnout. We got a 40% turnout. So I think what I would say is, yes, it's hard, but, and this is part of what I put in this book, every one of you has a communication footprint. In smaller towns, it's letters to the editor, it's Facebook posts, it's framing it early the right way. And whatever we did, I mean, Mike DeWine and Fran DeWine put their entire brand on the line with that ridiculous ad at the end. This goes too far. And you know what's amazing about the ultimate outcome of issue 1? I'm so livid with Mike DeWine for all he's done for these years on gerrymandering. Issue 1, his legacy is in tatters, and that ad symbolized it for me. But you know what's amazing? An entire state looked at a guy who won by 26 points, who was saying, trust me, trust Fran, we think this is too far. And the 57% vote in November was the precise number that every poll shows are how Ohioans think about pro-choice. He didn't convince anyone. No one bought it at all. And I think that's because of the grassroots, the communication, the framing. Yes, a lot of money came in late, but the fact that that thing ended up at almost at the exact percentage point that every poll has shown us for 2 years reflects where Ohio stands on pro-choice, I think it meant the initial framing stuck. And they couldn't combat it with all their nonsense. It was all lies. And I think their literally absurd, illegal tactic of trying to undo our democracy in August destroyed their credibility come November. No one believed these guys anymore. And my hope is when they try and convince us to let them gerrymander again in 24, we do the same thing. We frame it as citizens doing the work, not politicians. That's a very strong frame. And in every way we communicate that, friends, neighbors, Facebook, if you have communication outlets of any sort, that's a great frame. I've done polling where it's very strong. No one trusts these politicians anymore, especially with the corruption in the State House. And so I think it's all of us. You, like, as I wrote in my book, it used to be, and Brewster would know this, and others, there was a war room for the Clinton campaign, right? It was like 12 people, probably all in their 20s or 30s. They were the war room. Well, now with social media, we're all the war room. Every single one of us. And this is why I hope you sign up for my Substack, because I get this stuff out there every day. We're all in the war room. And it's not the amazing 76 people on this call telling it to each other. It's every one of you 76 taking a look at every communication node you have. I see Linda is at Cuff, community organization. If you're on the free store, some messages are partisan, so you shouldn't use the free store to something partisan. But you can register voters at the free store. If you're involved, let's get that done. All of us have this massive footprint that we could use, and we often are not using it. We sort of talk to each other in a political space, and when the scale of the attack on democracy is as big as it is, and it's huge, it's the Koch brothers, it's Frank LaRose, it's all of it. If we only use our very small political footprint to fight for democracy, we are not at the scale that we need to be. If we all find a way to use all of what we do to lift democracy, to register people, to knock every apartment building in Cuff, is there a building captain who could register voters in that building? You all have knocked on doors like I have, where we skip too many buildings, right? Because it's 3 weeks to go. They're not registered. We skip them. No more. So I'm going to add one more link here. And this is the thing I talked about with Dan to begin. This is, oh, hold on, I got to find it. I love everyone to buy a book, but that's not why I'm here. I have created a website that basically everything in my book you can get on the website without buying a book. Here, I put on the website the same diagram and worksheet that I have in the book, where I say to everyone, see what you do every day and see how it can be. Here's the link to this footprint. Make inventory of what you do every day in all walks of life, and make a list and figure out what in that footprint you could use to lift voters, to engage voters. It may be that we're helping candidates, or it may be that we're registering people in a nonpartisan way. I would love it. And if this is such an awesome group, I've always loved talking to you guys. I would love it if we did a little experiment with all of you. You all do this, and a few months later, we report back how massive the effort this 76 people engaged in when they all used our footprint the way I'm talking about. I mean, the truth is, if you really did it, looking at Steve and Dan Hurley and Luce, my God, Rich, I mean, it'd be massive. And we often are leaving most of our potential work engaging voters on the sidelines. Frank LaRose uses every aspect of his power to hurt voters, doesn't he? The Koch brothers are using their entire footprints to subvert democracy. And we too often rely on a few people and a little bit of money without using so much of the footprint that we have that could actually scale up and battle all these people. So I'll stop talking with that, but there's so much we could all do.
I want to do a quick housekeeping thing, and then we'll give David just a second to rest here. I want to put in the chat right now where you can get the minutes. They'll be out on our Bold New Democracy website. And specifically there at the address I just put in the minutes, boldnewdemocracy.org/actions-taking. They should be there by Thursday. There'll be a recording of this event, and I'll also add all of that, David's, make sure we get all of David's links in that minutes as well. Any questions about that? If you want to copy that real quick, you can do that. boldnewdemocracy.org/actions-taking. If you go to boldnewdemocracy.org, you'll see a site map. That's another easy way to find that part of our website. Dave, how you doing?
I'm good. This is healing my illness, so you get me fired up. That seems to help. When I came in here, my wife was like, "You cannot do this. You're like falling apart." But it helped me get fired up. So, and the soup is very good.
Okay, good. Well, we'll continue and you tell us when you need to stop.
Okay,
The
we can.
group
I'm
is
happy to take a few more questions. I think I've
okay.
shared what I wanted to in terms of links and everything. So
Okay, great. Okay, Lynn, you're up.
Hi, David
Hey,
Pepper. I've seen you a couple of times. The last time I saw you was in Columbus on a rainy day. You were talking about fracking waste or fracking in
oh,
Ohio
you saw,
and
yeah.
the chicken law. And the young people are really upset by this issue. And the Democrats, the DNC doesn't seem to ever address it. It's just low on the agenda, but it's so high with the youth vote, and that's what we need.
Hmm. Yeah, I know. I tried to explain. I mean, I think that my guess is we have officials in the Democratic side, including Sher Brown, with different views on overall fracking because there are communities in Eastern Ohio that it's the heart of their economy. But as we talked about that day, I mean, the idea that they're fracking in our state parks is outrageous, outrageous. And that's something I think most people can agree on. And again, going back to my overall model I showed, they use public assets to benefit private players. Well, that's what that is. Here's a public asset, our state parks, and they're drilling into it to enrich people who will then give them some of the money back. It's the same as ECOT. It's the same as First Energy. It's all the same thing. And one of the things I pointed out at that rally, this is all the money, and this money flows to them in massive chunks now through dark money groups. And the source of all of the money that is funding Mike DeWine's campaigns and Matt Huffman is literally our dollars. It's our public school dollars going to ECOT. They get a bunch of it. It's our assets in our parks that they want to frack. It's our First energy bills. It's even, this is, some of you I appreciate help me run for Attorney General. The biggest pay to play, maybe in the state of Ohio, most directly, is how much money the Attorney General raises from the people who collect debt on student debtors and people can't pay their medical bills. And they give out collections work to private companies who then go out and do it on behalf of the Attorney General. And those private companies basically tithe a percentage of the amount they collect to the politicians. So one of the biggest funders of Ohio Republican candidates are people in student debt. So all of it's not only pay to play corruption. All of our money, without us knowing it, is actually the source of the big money that ends up paying for ridiculous TV ads. That to me, and that's what I tried to explain at that event. I mean, it's absolutely, and Democrats have to, in the future, hopefully, I agree on the point about not being too partisan to scare off Republicans, but we better be anti-corrupt. And I would, if I were running for governor or attorney general or any of it, the heart of it would be to cut out all that corruption. But as we talked about, to make sure people realize this isn't some 30,000 foot corruption far away. You're paying for all of it. You're paying for it in your schools getting worse. You're paying for it when you pay student debt. You're paying for it when you pay your energy bills. You are fueling Mike DeWine's campaigns and all the others. And I think we have, and that's what, and fracking and state parks in particular fits exactly into that model.
Okay, Bill.
Hello, is that for me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I had this question for Mr. Pepper. I noticed that at the city level in Ohio, like in Cincinnati, for instance, when the city committee of the Democratic Party was deciding how to function, and they've made their slate such a big deal. Their goal, quite frankly now, and they succeeded in doing it in the last election, was to basically marginalize the Republican Party and the Charter Committee and establish one party rule of the city. And their model was what the Democrats had already done in Columbus. And it just seems to me that, if people broadly and Democrats in particular want to advocate, against gerrymandering and unfair election rules, one of the things that the Democratic Party could easily do in the cities where it has dominant power is to end that and to endorse, for instance, multi-member districts for city council elections with ranked choice voting. I mean, I think it's how can the Democrats have any authority to move the dial against anti-democratic practice at the state level when it does practice anti-democratic processes at the city level in the cities that they control? I don't get that, and I think that's low-hanging fruit. But I see the city committee, the Democratic Party, becoming more and more like a a classic party club, like the Republicans were in Cincinnati before 1925, and the Democrats were in the 1870s and 1880s.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair concern. And I was quoted, I'm the former chair of the Democratic Party, and I was called by the Inquirer about, and this is going to sound surprising to some, hey, what do you think about the fact that there are only 10 people running and 9 are Democrats? I said, I think that's not healthy. I said, I actually go back, and Brewster, you'll remember this kind of stuff, and others too, Linda, although they were crazy meetings, the 27-person city council community forums were actually democracy in action. I had Nate Livingston on one side, Tom Brinkman on the other. It was nuts, but it actually, in the end, was healthy. And I actually felt, I'm sure it was hard to sit through those meetings for candidates, but also for people in the meetings. But I actually felt, in looking back at it was healthy. And I think we were probably better office holders because we had to run the gauntlet of a crowded field, and we felt pressure. My God, you better work hard to win. So you better go to that community forum. You better hear what they say. When I first ran for city council, I don't want to romanticize myself here, but I was pretty new to Cincinnati. I'll admit this, I was very worried that people would say, and Brewster will remember this, hey, this guy just got back here. What the heck does he know? So for 4 months, I went to every community council every single month to listen, to not say a word. Joe, you should do this. I didn't give a speech. I just listened. I took notes because I knew I had to be I had to be top 9 out of 30. I better be on my game. So I think long-term, you're right. I can't fault the Cincinnati Democrats right now, though. They basically ran a smart campaign, and they endorsed 9 people. If they started making moves that were gerrymandering or something else, like they have figured out that an endorsement list is the way you win, and they hadn't done that before. At the same time, I don't think a system of 10 people running for 9 seats long-term is healthy. My guess is the way democracy works, unless people are locking in power, is it sort of corrects itself. By the way, I teach election law and voting rights. And I've always thought that having a system about reform, one reform I actually always thought once I was on council for a few years that might make sense, and I don't know if it would change the dynamic you've described, Bill, would be a hybrid at-large and district system. Because my worry was that some neighborhoods in Cincinnati would just get lost in the shuffle, and that a bunch of people really, if you had a well-organized community council, we knew what Mount Washington wanted, we knew what Oakley wanted, but a bunch of neighborhoods with real struggles had very little organization, had a very muted voice, and no council member felt responsibility for their issues. So the reform I always thought about when I was on council that I think would help with some representation would be sort of a hybrid system. And I don't know if that would sort out the other. That might sort out the issue of one party rule. It may not. But I don't really fault that. I mean, the Democrats campaigned well, and I hate to say it. By the way, I'm friends with Liz Keating. I really liked her. I think she's in a very challenging world for Republicans where almost all of them cave. She never did. I really respect her. I love all the ones that won. I was sad she lost. And I think she's paying the price for a Trump Republican Party that has destroyed the brand. So if you didn't know Liz Keating, but you heard she was a Republican, you just weren't going to vote for her. So I think this is partly the fault of an Alex Tranafilu and others who have managed over 6 years to destroy the old moderate brand of the Hamilton County Republican Party. So someone like Liz Keating doesn't have nearly the shot that candidates used to have, like an Amy Murray.
Yeah.
Long
And
answer.
also the Democratic City Committee leader is now a lobbyist. It's like there's a problem there, and I think the Democrats have got to deal with it.
I think Democrats need to be careful. I mean, I think that's true in all our cities. I mean, the essential, but again, I don't fault them this time because I actually think they put together an effort. They have good candidates. They didn't mess with the structure. They didn't gerrymander it. But I think long term, the thing I always get called out on by Republicans is, well, Democrats gerrymander too. They don't gerrymander nearly as much or as extremely as Republicans. But I'll be the first to say, yeah, they do sometimes. And when they do, you'll probably get worse results from governance than when they don't. So I'm a big picture reformer that we should have better representation and have people feel, as an office holder, enough competition so they feel accountability back to the people. You know, that was my experience when I ran for city council. I had to be top out of 30. Everyone told me I would never win the first time. I had no notion that I would win. And then the second race was county commission. I had to beat Phil Heimlich. I was a total underdog. So I never was in a race where I didn't feel accountable to go out and hustle. I think politicians are far better if they feel that competitive pressure in a general election and not just a primary.
Okay, we'll take one more question. Shot, it's you.
Yeah. David, thank you so much for coming. You're giving us a lot of great ideas. I am a real huge advocate for single payer health insurance. And I love Sherrod Brown to death, but he refuses to embrace it. Why will Democrats not embrace that as an issue with the mess our healthcare system is in right now?
You know, I think it's the true answer is probably a sticky wicket politically, but I also think I have a book behind me. Well, I don't remember what it's called now, but it's all about that system. And I'm not a healthcare expert, but I think they think the approach of moving towards, you know, continuing to broaden Obamacare, not destroying private plans is the safer path. Although I think there are really good arguments as to why in the end that's not the real solution. So my guess is that the continued transition towards that broadening Obamacare, and we already see Trump is going to try and destroy Obamacare. That's a hell of an issue to run on in 2024. Probably a better issue than you know, explaining single payer. I mean, I'll just raw politics. I think Elizabeth Warren might have been the candidate for the presidency, but she, at a couple moments, had a hard time explaining it. I mean, do you remember the debates in the beginning of the Democratic primary? Elizabeth Warren was unbelievable. She was absolutely unbelievable at debates. Do you agree? Like, nod? She was incredible. But about 2 or 3 debates in, she got caught up defending single payer more than Bernie did. And she hadn't really been this single payer person. She had been the anti-monopoly person, the CFPB person. It really, if you look back at it, there were some moments where I think that was, and also I think a lot of politicians look at that and think it gets complicated. It can be easily tarred and feathered. And so that's my honest answer. But hey, let me just say as we close, thank you. Good question. You may not like the answer, but that's my sort of fair answer. And like I said, I have books behind me challenging myself to think through what the best system is. And I think there's clearly a lot of need for improvement. My father and mother, between us, well, it was a big group. So they've been in the hospital out lately. And boy, when you're in the hospital, do you see the problems of our healthcare system? You just see it. It's such a, I mean, and these are 2 people with a lot of privilege, and you're watching them go through it, and you're thinking, my God, what a bad system we have. And then imagine people who don't have the access that my parents have. So you really, my dad literally left. He had to go in. He got a knee replaced the other day, and he had a low sodium count. He had to go in for a few days. And his number one conclusion leaving after 5 days at Christ was, my God, how do we fix this broken system? And it's clearly not where it needs to be. Let me just close by saying, as I started, or as I said, I would love it. I'm gonna put this thing up again. I would love it if people left this call. We all could celebrate the fact that we have, I think, 95 or 94 candidates out of 99. That's a huge achievement over 79 only 2 years ago. So if Blue Ohio is going to help us support them, so if you want to join that, we'd love to have you. And then beyond that, would love, love, love to have you all do this step, take this footprint I'm going to give you, and not to invite myself back. I know I can talk a lot, but let's meet again in like 3 or 4 months I'd love to have people say to me, and I've had this happen. Oh, well, I reached out to my nonprofit I'm on the board of, and they're now registering voters. And what I would love to do is in 3 or 4 months, have that conversation, and you all tell me, well, I did this, this, and this, and here's what worked. And we all learn from that, and we all do even more. And when you tell me that, I'll brag about it around the country. So here's your footprint, and let's use this amazing group. And there's no better group I can think of than this group to go out and use our footprints and then learn every step of the way. Here's a part of your footprint. Who here knows AFTAB and Mika and all them? Talk to them about how they could use rec centers. I mean, anyone you know who's powerful, any of it, talk to them, ask them. And if they say, hey, we're not registering people at the drop-in center, the question is, why not? That's who Frank LaRose has been purging for 3 years. Why aren't you? You could. It's not partisan. Why not? And the answer will never be good. Good.
Okay,
Thank you,
we
everybody.
love.
You made me feel better physically and overall. So good to be
All
with
right.
you.
Remember that. We'll help you out next time
Thanks
too.
for all you're doing. I'm going to put a Blue Ohio link up one last time, just so people have it.
Great.
And our next meeting, I don't think we're going to meet in December because it's an odd time, but we normally meet the last Friday of every month at noon. And like people said, we have like awesome special guests. By the way, one other real big thing, these Supreme Court races this November, I know it's up to the State House. We all are going to work to help share it, of course. These Supreme Court races, as we learned, when we had a majority for a little window, we have to win. And Donnelly Stewart and this judge I know well, Lisa Forbes, great judges. And so when we should have them on one of these calls, by the way. They're great people, wonderful people. We got to get them in there.
Thank you very much,
Everybody.
David.
Take care.
Thank you, Dave.
Okay, one more time, I put our sign up form in the chat. So when we have David back, you'll know about it. You'll be sent a invitation. And each week you'll be getting, well, we're taking a Christmas break, but soon after that, you'll be getting ideas for what you can do to help save our democracy. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. I thought it was a great discussion, and David does a great job.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, David. Thank you, Jan, for facilitating so beautifully.
Excellent.
Thank you. Thank you, Ruth.
Get out of
Bye,
here.
guys. Thanks.
Oh, get me out.
Merry
Thank
Christmas.
you. Oh, I have to get myself out. Leave.
Bye, everyone.
All right.